I make these photographic images that attempt to depict the statistics that characterize our mass consumption. So here's one where I went and got lots of plastic bottles from a local recycling center, and I photographed them over and over, stirring them in between each photograph so it looks like different bottles each time. And then I can start to digitally paste all these pictures together in a way that looks like I took a picture of lots and lots of bottles. And so here's a digitally constructed image of 2 million plastic bottles, which is 5 minutes of our plastic bottle consumption in the United States. Kind of a strange thing to think that I took that photograph in my driveway. But I only had maybe enough bottles to cover just a little section of this table when I actually took the photograph. And what I'm exploring some themes here, like the relationship of the individual and the collective, and the relationship of the local and the global. You know, when you stand back at a distance, it looks like one thing, and hopefully what this one looks like is kind of an ocean, and then when you walk up close, you see something different. And so I'm trying to raise, in a subtle way, I'm trying to raise these issues and to almost trick the viewer into coming up and having a conversation with themselves in a way that they might not be ready for. And that's kind of my way to try to sneak past the defenses. And so when you stand back at a distance, actually this one starts up close. This is lots and lots of brown paper supermarket bags. There's 100 brown paper supermarket bags that I photographed and then restacked into a different stack and photographed them again, and did that hundreds of times until I had enough photographs of the same bags that I could start stacking the photographs until I built a gigantic image of 1.14 million brown paper supermarket bags, which is the number of brown paper supermarket bags we consume in the United States every hour. And when you stand back at a distance, hopefully it looks kind of like a forest, maybe the forest that these bags might have come from. And I'm really interested in this relationship of the near and the far. And there are many issues like that in the world where you stand back at a distance and you see something and you kind of think you understand it, you comprehend it, you've got it. And then when you walk up close and really look at the details, it turns into something completely different. And so I work with that as a visual theme in my work, and our consumption is very much like that. You know, you stand back at a distance from our mass consumption, and it looks pretty good. You know, I mean, look at the nice room we all get to be in, and the nice jets we got to fly here on, and the nice lunch we had, and so on. You know, our mass consumption, we Americans tend culturally to think that mass consumption is a good thing. And then, you know, you look at other, you sort of zoom in and look closely at things like the high rate of depression among wealthy professionals. Millions and millions of wealthy professionals going to their doctor and saying, I'm depressed, and I don't know any way out, and so I need a drug. High rates of suicide in professions like the legal profession, and high rates of alcohol and drug abuse, and so on. They're all, if you zoom in close and you get a different picture of what American consumption is and how it's affecting us. Went outside with my camera on a rare, clear day in Seattle and took pictures of jets flying overhead and began layering them all together into a picture of 11,000 jet trails, which is 8 hours of our jet flights in the United States. I tried a full day, 33,000 jet flights, and it just came out to be a solid white mass. You couldn't even tell what it was, so I had to back off and make it 8 hours of our jet flights. So it takes 3 of this image to show just the number of commercial jet airliner flights in the United States every day. This is the piece that was used as the cover of the book this year. This is a very close-up version. I became really interested in the Pacific Garbage Patch in 2009, and I devoted most of my year to trying to visually depict this gigantic, invisible problem. And that's really the motivation behind all of my work. It's to try to take these invisible issues and make them tangible somehow. Because if you think about our mass consumption, any aspect of our mass consumption, whether it's the amount of oil that we burn, or the amount of cell phones that we create, or the amount of some mineral that we extract, or the number of people who work for less than fair wage so that we can have shoes, or whatever, like any issue around our mass consumption, the only information that we have available about it, to try to relate to that issue, the only information we have comes to us in the form of gigantic numbers. Because you can't go see it. You know, there's nowhere you can go and see all the oil we burn in the United States in one day. It's spread out over thousands and thousands of different locations. There's nowhere you can see all the trees that we cut down to make the paper for junk mail, or all of the minerals that are extracted from the ground so that we can have new cell phones. It's like there's no Mount Everest of our consumption anywhere that we can go stand in front of and behold with our senses. And so we're kind of stuck with these statistics, you know, numbers that are incomprehensible to our minds, because there are all these sociological studies out there that demonstrate that the human mind cannot comprehend numbers more than a few thousand. And yet every day we're bombarded with these numbers in the hundreds of thousands or the millions or hundreds of millions, or 200 billion plastic bottles consumed in the United States every year. Or now we're even talking numbers in the trillions in relation to our economy, and these numbers are incomprehensible to us. They simply don't even go in one ear and out the other. I think they go in one ear and back out the same ear. We can't make any kind of meaning out of these gigantic numbers, and yet that's the only information we have available to us to try to relate to these profoundly important phenomena like global climate change and the loss of our forests and the overfishing of our oceans and so on. And so what I'm really interested in doing is trying to take those incomprehensible statistics that we can't really feel anything about and to translate them into a visual language that allows us to make some kind of meaning and hopefully feel something. And so this was my first stab at a piece about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which you probably have heard. There's kind of actually a misunderstanding about what the Pacific Garbage Patch is. And I held that misunderstanding myself for a while, because the first thing I heard about it, and what most people have heard, is that it's a giant floating island of plastic garbage in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that's twice the size of the state of Texas. And as a photographer who photographs garbage, the first thing I thought was, wow, I got to go there and take a picture of that. And I started looking around for satellite photographs and talking to people who sail out in that area, and there are no satellite photographs. There are no photographs of the Pacific Garbage Patch, and people who sail through that area all say that if you sail a boat to the middle of the Pacific Garbage Patch, what you will see is the great wide open blue Pacific, because the garbage in the Pacific Garbage Patch is underwater. It's held in suspension in the water between the surface and about 60 feet, and most of it, our plastic bags, our bottle caps, our bottles, our toothbrushes, our magic markers and cigarette lighters and so on, have broken down into these infinitesimally tiny particles of plastic that aren't even visible if you swim around in them. It looks like milk. It's just a kind of a milkiness to the water. And so the research vessels that go out there looking for the millions of tons of plastic that we know are out there have a really hard time finding it, because it's the size of plankton. It's these tiny, tiny particles. But there is quite a bit of it that hasn't yet broken down, and a marine research vessel sent me a gigantic box of plastic that I used to build this image. So these are some close-ups. You can see that yellow bottle's been chewed up by fish. You can see bottle caps, lots of random chunks of plastic, combs, pen caps, pieces of fishing line, and we're going to slowly zoom further out from this piece. And you can see that I'm a little obsessive. I made this out of 2.4 million pieces of plastic from the Pacific Ocean. And 2.4 million, that is equal to the number of pounds of plastic that enter the world's oceans every hour. And even at that size, I know it's kind of incomprehensible. And this is one of the things that as I've been doing this work over the last few years, I began to realize that these pieces are really just shadows, vague shadows of the actual issues. And then each one of these issues, whether it's the amount of oil we burn or the amount of plastic that's introduced to our oceans, we have this huge smorgasbord of these issues that we all read about and that we're all trying to comprehend. And each one of these issues is merely a shadow of the enormous calamity of environmental and social destruction that humanity is facing right now.